The currency reset has begun, and I have some very shocking details for you. And I know many people are talking about the World Economic Forum's, pending Great Reset. But today, I am going to show you that it's already here. It's already in the process of transferring wealth from the many to the few, and I'm going to break it down into 4 sections. Now, we're going to look at what's led up to this at this point, when is it finally going to happen, what it looks like on the other side of this reset, and of course, most importantly, how we need to be prepared. Now, if you're focused on making more money, keeping more money, and growing your money for the future, then this is important information you do not want to miss, so stay tuned. All right, welcome back. If you're new to the channel, my name is Mark Moss. Now, I believe that the future is not set. It's actually up for us to create. Now, we do this with information. We do this by taking action on the information. So you are in the right place because you're here getting information. Hopefully you can take action. Now, if you want to help me get this information to more people, just take one quick second, click on that like button right now so the algorithm shares the video with more people. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so you're notified every time I put new videos out. Now today, I am breaking down a little bit more of the Great Reset. Now that's a big concept and a lot of people have talked about it from a high level. I've dug into some little specifics about it, and today specifically we'll be talking about the currency reset portion of it. And I'm going to show you how it's already begun. So the first step that we're going to dig into is to understand this, to understand how we got to this point, to understand where we need to go. So the first step is to understand, how did we get to this point? How did we get to the point where we even need to reset the currency? And to understand this, of course, we need to take a quick trip back into history. If you follow my channel at all, you know I love to go back into history. So let's jump into the history, into the time machine, go back in history to understand currency. So we're going to jump in the time machine all the way back to 1694. Now this is when the Bank of England was formed. And at that time, England needed money, of course, right? It needed money to continue its effort to defeat the French. And it needed money because it couldn't raise taxes any higher. As a matter of fact, at this time, it was just coming out of a civil war. And the civil war was waged over the king's attempt to increase his taxing power. So they were done. There was no way they could raise taxes at this point. So England, like all governments before it, of course, it relied on the rich. And at that time, the rich were essentially, they were the bankers. They were the ones that loaned out the money to help finance the kingdom or the country. But at that time, England's credit was bad. It was bad. It was just coming out of the war. So what could it do? Well, a committee of the House of Commons was formed to figure out how they could raise money for the war effort. And to the rescue came an ambitious Scottish promoter. His name was William Paterson. Now, William Paterson came on behalf of his financial group, and he proposed a remarkable new scheme to Parliament. Now, in exchange, or I should say in return, for the Parliament giving them a set of important special privileges from the state, Paterson and his group of, the wealthy elite would basically form the Bank of England. Now, the Bank of England would then be able to issue new paper notes, currency, much of which would be used to finance the English deficit. Like I said, they really needed money. So in short, since there was not enough private savers willing to finance the deficit, then Paterson and his group, they were going to be nice enough to buy all the government bonds up, or basically government bonds loaning money to the government, but with a catch. All right, here's the catch. As long as they could do it with their newly created out of thin air banknotes or paper currency. So they'll loan the government as much money as they want, as long as they could do it with money they created out of thin air. Sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? Now, if you want to learn more about this history and how money and banking works, I highly recommend you read the book titled The Mystery of Banking by Murray Rothbard. And as a free gift to you, I actually have a free copy of the book waiting for you. It's linked in the description of this video. So go down there, you can download the PDF version of the book for free. All right, so now you know how the fake paper currency was first created. Now, of course, once it was created by England, then of course the rest of the world wanted to follow suit, right? I mean, who doesn't want an endless amount of free money, right? Everybody does. I mean, which government could refuse that? Of course, none could. And so the rise of government-issued fiat currencies quickly made its way all the way across the globe. Now, fiat currency refers to any currency that a government declares to be legal tender. So throughout history, we've seen fiat currencies have had the order of rising and eventually collapsing. And it's almost always due to inflation and devaluation. And it's pretty much always the same way. It starts with the paper money being introduced into an economy where all this new money creates an economic boom. It's great. Oh my gosh, we're creating so much prosperity. But over time, because of course of human nature, it gets overprinted. And then because it's overprinted, it slowly starts to build inflation, and that inflation causes it to start losing value. And eventually it devalues enough to lead to not only its own collapse, but also the collapse of the economy that it's connected to. And of course, what comes next after that? Well, to keep the game going, of course, the game has to be reset, has to be restarted. And of course, a new form of money has to be introduced to replace the failed one. Now, while fiat currencies may stick around for a while, history shows us that inevitably they all fail at some point. All right, so let's move into step number 2, which is setting up the Great Reset. Now, according to a study of over 775 fiat currencies done by dollardays.org, there is no historical precedence for a fiat currency that has succeeded in holding its value. Let me say that again. There's been no fiat currency that's ever succeeded in holding its value. As a matter of fact, the average life expectancy for a fiat currency is only 27 years, and the oldest currency has been around for about 300 years, which is the one created by the Bank of England, the British pound sterling. As it's the oldest fiat currency in existence, which you would think would be a sign of success, right? But success is relative. So over its 300-year existence, it's actually lost over 99.5% of its value. So that's not too successful, at least in my book. Now, as I stated, the Great Currency Reset, it's already begun. And that's because the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, and it's going to blow up. It is blowing up on a global scale. Now, remember I said that currencies always blow up in the same way. So currency creation creates this economic boom, but then too much of it leads to devaluation, and then finally to the collapse. So if you're looking at the chart on the screen right now, you can see the Federal Reserve's M1 money supply chart. Now you can see that the money supply has been expanding over the last 40 years that were covered in this chart right here. And you can look how fast it's accelerated since the 2008 great financial crash. And then it's basically gone straight up in a vertical line just since 2020. Now in 2020, the Federal Reserve created about 30% of the money supply in 1 year, which is why you see it going straight up like that. You can also notice that in 2008, in the 2008 great financial crash, the Federal Reserve put about $1 trillion out, and it's barely even noticeable. Look at that. When you're zooming out looking at the chart, you can barely even notice that $1 trillion that hit the system. That's how small it is in comparison. Now, many people think that all this is caused by the global pandemic, right? The global pandemic broke out in March of 2020, and so the whole world was forced to shut down, the economy was shut down, and so what could the government do? What could the Fed do? Of course they have to print money and give it away, right? Well, it didn't cause the problem. All right, it didn't cause the problem. The global pandemic didn't cause the problem. As a matter of fact, what it did is only accelerated things. All right. Now we can see this very easily by looking at the banking currency system. And we can see that this problem actually really started breaking apart in September of 2019. September of 2019 is when the overnight bank repo markets seized up for the first time. Now, in an attempt to save the banking system, the Federal Reserve had to jump in immediately overnight and pump in $500 billion just to save the banking system. Otherwise, it would have been seized up and the whole thing would have collapsed. So they pumped in $500 billion overnight to save it, but of course this didn't save it. It only kept it alive a little bit longer. Now, the amount that the Fed needed to pump in to keep this whole system going, it had to continue to grow and grow and grow. And by the time the pandemic hit in March of 2020, the Fed was already pumping in almost $1 trillion per day just to keep the system from crashing. Now, again, like I said, the pandemic didn't create the problem, but it is accelerating it. And it's really giving them the perfect excuse, the perfect reason to cover up their mistakes. And of course, these are their words. These aren't mine. I'm not saying this. This is their words. We can see that Klaus Schwab, the leader of the World Economic Forum, wrote a book titled The Great Reset. And he said, quote, Pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. And the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, just said basically the same thing, saying that, quote, the pandemic is an opportunity for a global reset. And so you can see this, all right? It's already happening. The Federal Reserve and the central banks are creating and injecting trillions of dollars. But it's all a big experiment that most people think is an effort to save the system or kicking the can down the road, so to speak. But what if they don't want to save the system? What if they're just waiting until they're ready to actually make the switch? And that brings us to step number 3, which is, what does it look like on the other side? What is this big switch that they are switching us into? All right. So if currencies always rise and always fall, right, and the current US dollar system is basically on its last legs, what comes next? Now, I think it's the end of money and it's the end of currency as we know it. And instead, we're moving into something much different that we've never seen before. As a matter of fact, it's not money, it's not currency, it's a government ledger, a credit system. So let me dig into that. So we've talked about this, I've talked about this in several videos, CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. They're here, all right? Now in 2018, a survey by the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, which is basically the central bank above all central banks, back in 2018, they reported that 63 central banks were already working on a digital currency. Now, like I said, I've done several videos on this. I've reported that China was the first country to really release its CBDC to the world. It released it to the wild in October 12th. Other countries are really coming up close. They're really following pretty tight here. We've seen Sweden, Turkey, Iran, several Caribbean nations. Of course, the United States is also working on their own Fed coin or central bank digital currency, right? The United States can't be outdone, and neither can the IMF, who's now calling for a Bretton Woods 2 moment, and they've released plans for their own central bank digital currency. So this is the big reset, switching us from a currency system over to a digital form of currency. All right, but like I said, this is not currency or money as we know it. This is something completely different. Money or currency, we can hold ourselves. We can have access to that, and then we can exchange hands for it as we see fit. CBDCs are something completely different that have some very, very unique characteristics. All right, so the first one I've covered the first two. The third one I haven't covered yet before. So the first one is programmable. So it's programmable money. So that means that when they give it out, they can program it to do certain things. So let me give you an example. When they sent out the stimulus money in the pandemic, they sent that out to stimulate the economy, right? If they sent it out to people, they hoped those people would go spend the money, which would help stimulate the economy. But most people didn't. Most people wish they actually had more savings at that time. So instead of spending that money, they saved it. A lot of people invested it. They went into Robinhood, etc. We've talked about that. So they could program the money. So for example, they could send you the money and say, if you don't spend this money by Friday, it comes back to us, right? Or they could say that we'll give you the money, but you can't spend it on Robinhood or stocks or investing. You can only spend it on food or shopping, right? So things like that. So they can program the money. The next thing that they can do with CBDCs are behavioral modification. And this one's very important. So for example, they could actually program it to modify your behavior. So for example, they could say, hey, you're not saving enough money. So in order to get you to save more money, to have the behavior we want, we're gonna pay you 5% interest or 10% interest on the money that you save. Or they could say, hey, Mark, you're hoarding too much money. You need to go save it. So we're gonna charge you 5% interest on your money. Behavioral, they could also say, if you do these things, you get more stimulus. If you do these things, you get less stimulus. So they can do all these things to create this behavioral modification. And I've covered those two things. But the third thing that this is really going into, the type of system that we're going into, the reset, is where we don't actually have any money. We don't even have any currency, right? Currency, like I said, I can store at my house, I can exchange directly with you, but we're going into something different that I believe is more of a ledger system. So there is no money, there is no currency. The government, the central bank, just creates a ledger, and they give us credits to use as they see fit, and we can earn credits and we can use those credits. And so the central bank digital currencies become this basic totalitarian way to not only surveil and watch, but also control everything that we do. They can issue us credits and take those credits away based off of the behavior that we're doing. All right, now that's a scary world, but as I said in the beginning, the future is not set. The future is not certain. The future is for us to create. And so finally, this takes us to step number 4, which is surviving the great currency reset. Now, the best way not to get caught up in their game is to not play the game at all. So they are playing the game with their financial system, with the banking system, with the money, with the currency. And so we can sidestep out of the currency system, out of the financial system. We can do that by holding assets that are outside the system, things that cannot be manipulated by them. And of course, what are those things? Well, they're real, hard, tangible assets. We want to own real wealth. You see, money is not wealth. They think that they can just create another $1 trillion and send it out to everybody and everybody's more wealthy. But money is not wealth. Money measures wealth. Money measures how much wealth we can acquire. And so wealth is actually real, hard, tangible things. It's goods, it's services. That's what wealth is. And so we want to hold those things. So obviously the big ones that you probably think of are gold, silver. That's a way for us to get our money out of the financial system and hold it in a way that can't be manipulated. Other things like commodities, these could be everything from food, wheat, oil, energy, things like that. Of course, precious metals as well. And of course, my favorite, which is Bitcoin. Now, it's not real as in the sense that you can't hold it in your hand, but it is real in the sense that it's digital. And most importantly, it's real because it cannot be inflated. They can't create more of it, and they can't steal it, seize it, or manipulate it. And so we want to get out. We don't want to play that game. We want to get out of that game. We need to hold our purchasing power. This is the key piece here. People think about things in terms of dollars. So gold went down in terms of dollars. Oil went down in terms of dollars. But it's really about preserving our purchasing power. Because when the Great Reset happens, when the crash happens, if we can retain our purchasing power, then we can play the game the rich are playing, which is take that purchasing power and go back and buy the assets that have retained or that have retained some value and that will grow back into the new system. So that's step number 4. That's how we survive the great currency reset. Step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let me know what you think down below. Do you see the same things happening? And which steps are you taking to protect yourselves from the great currency reset? Leave me a comment, let me know. As always, give me a thumbs up on this video if you like it. If you don't like the video, I don't know why, but give me a thumbs down. Either way, I don't care. I want to hear from you, but leave me a comment and let me know. I try to respond to every comment that I can, at least for the first couple days. All right, that's what I got for you today. To your success, I'm out.